So this is the Gideon Optics Mediator, and this was Gideon Optics' very first enclosed emitter red dot. Now I've got a little over a couple thousand rounds on that optic now, and it's held up great, but I had two issues with that dot. My first issue with the original Mediator was how small the window size was, but a couple years ago that was the trade-off if you wanted an enclosed emitter pistol dot. And my second issue with the Mediator was the emitter itself. It just wasn't that bright. Even turned all the way up on the highest setting on a very bright sunny day, it was a little bit hard to see. Well, Gideon Optics took care of those two issues I had with the original Mediator with the Mediator 2. Let's check it out. Alright, let's take a close look at this optic and go over all the specs. So this is your side that has your plus and minus button to adjust your brightness level up and down. This is the back of the optic. On this side is where you mount your optic either to the riser that comes with the optic in the box, or you can go on Gideon Optics website and order an RMR to acro adapter if you want to put this on a pistol, and they also have an MOS to acro adapter plate. This is what the front of the optic looks like. And here on top, this is where things have changed quite a bit, because now instead of a side load battery like on the original Mediator, the Mediator 2 has a top load battery. Now, for everyone wondering what all comes in the box, I am going to bring a picture up of that on the screen and let you check that out. Alright, I got the battery installed and I've got the optic turned all the way up, and I must say that this is nice and bright. That was one of my biggest complaints with the original, is that it was not that bright, and that is definitely not the case on this one. Now I am getting some starbursting, but I do have astigmatism, so that's on me and not on the dot. But what's super cool about this dot, this has a multi-reticle system. So right now we have the 3 MOA dot turned on. You're going to hold the up button for 3 seconds. And it's going to be hard to see on the camera, so I will bring a picture of the reticles up on the screen. But now we are running the 28 MOA circle. And if you hold the plus button for 3 seconds again, now the dot and circle's turned on. So now we're running the 3 MOA dot with the 28 MOA circle. Alright, so let's go over some quick dimensions on this. This has a length of 47.1 millimeters. It is 30.4 millimeters wide, and it's 35.2 millimeters tall. And with the battery installed, this weighs in at 3.2 ounces. Got a little bit of weight to it. Now, the housing on the Mediator 2 is constructed out of 7075 T6 aluminum, and it does come with an IPX7 waterproof rating. Now let's talk a little bit about the battery and the battery life on this. It does run on a CR2032 battery. It does have a 50,000 hour battery life, but obviously that's going to be on the lowest setting. And another reason it has that battery life is the fact that it does have shake awake, and this will go to sleep after 225 seconds. And once you grab whatever this is mounted on, it will turn right back on, and we will test that towards the end of the video to make sure it works. Now, the Mediator 2 does have 10 brightness settings, 8 daytime settings, and 2 NV. Now, I went and grabbed the original Mediator just so we could kind of look at the differences and go over some of those differences. Now, we already talked, this one has the top load battery. This one has a side load battery. Another big difference between the two, this one has the multi-reticle system, and this one here is just a red dot. The next huge improvement on this optic was the fact that they went with a lot bigger window size on the Mediator 2, which is easy to see here when they're side by side. And for an enclosed emitter dot, the window size on this Mediator 2 is pretty good. This is coming in at 21.4 millimeters by 18.8 millimeters. Where with the original Mediator, this only had a 16 millimeter lens on it. And the last big change on the Mediator 2 over the Mediator is the fact that the emitter on this is in the top, and the emitter on the original Mediator is down here on the bottom. Now you might be asking, what's the big deal about having the emitter on the top versus on the bottom? Well, if you look here, what they've been able to do now is lower the lens down even further towards the bottom of the optic. And the reason this is such a big deal is because when you go to mount this on an RMR to acro plate or an MOS to acro plate, you're going to be able to co-witness your iron sights as long as you have suppressor height sights. Where with the way the original Mediator was designed, it was almost impossible to get a co-witness once this was mounted on the optic plate on the slide. Now, one thing that I like to do in all these optic review videos is test the windage and elevation to see how tactile and audible the clicks are. We're going to start with the windage first. Oh, nice. Very nice tactile clicks, somewhat audible. Let's check our elevation. Same thing on the elevation. Nice clicks. Let me put my mic down here and see if you can hear the clicks. Now these are 1 MOA per click. You do have 45 MOA of total travel on the windage and the same on the elevation. And the last thing we need to talk about before we head out to the range, this does come with Gideon Optics lifetime warranty. Now, as soon as I got to the range, I got the optic sighted in. It took 4 or 5 rounds to get the zero right where I wanted it. And I started shooting the US PSA targets and the steel targets. And the first thing I noticed right out the gate was how much nicer it is to have this bigger window on the Mediator 2 versus the original Mediator. Now, the glass quality on this is really nice. It's nice, clear glass. And the red dot itself is a lot brighter than the original Mediator. Now, one thing for me with my eyes and my astigmatism is with enclosed emitter dots, even when they're a red dot, I see less starbursting with an enclosed emitter versus an open emitter optic. And the same holds true with the Mediator 2. All right, here we go. We've got all our hits on steel. All right, this target's not too bad. We got all alphas. All right, this target's not too hot. We've got all alphas, but we've got 3 Charlies right here. And I did that double tap and I sent one right up here. And we've got all our hits on steel. Now inside the studio here, I've got this dot turned all the way up and I am getting some starbursting. But once I got out to the range, I turned the dot all the way up and then I turned it 2 clicks down. And at that point, I was getting very little starbursting and the dot was plenty bright enough for the rest of the day doing the review. Now with the original Mediator, one thing that I noticed was when I was transitioning from target to target, with that smaller narrow window, I was not able to track my targets as well as I do with an open emitter dot. But being that this Mediator 2 has a bigger window, transitioning from target to target was definitely a lot easier with the Mediator 2 versus the original. All right, we got all our hits on steel. All right, on this target, we've got all alphas and 2 Charlie. This target's a little better. We got a big cluster of alphas, but we have a Charlie here and a Charlie here, just right outside of the perf. And we've got all our hits on steel. Now, once I was done shooting the US PSA and the steel targets, I wanted to move on to shooting some 10-shot groups. So I shot a couple 10-shot groups. I went back to the truck. I put the tailgate down and I started racking the optic off the back of my tailgate, and I went back and shot another 10-shot group, and I'm happy to say that the optic did not lose zero. One thing that you have to keep in mind when you have an optic with this style footprint, you have a mounting plate which is going to go direct to your slide, held on by 2 screws, and then you are bolting the optic to that plate. And sometimes these optics have a tendency to loosen up on you, but I did not have that issue with the Mediator 2. Now, as far as the optic plate goes, I did use blue Loctite. I used 18-inch pounds to secure the plate to the slide, and then when I went to mount the optic to the plate, I used 20-inch pounds. So let's start talking about the pros and cons with the Mediator 2. We'll start out with the cons first because there's really not that many cons. One of the cons with this optic for a lot of people is going to be the size. It is a very large optic, especially sitting on the slide of this PPQ M2. And like I said, this is not going to stay on here. I just wanted to do the first review on this optic on a pistol. But a lot of people already don't like enclosed emitter dots. And with this having the top load battery, it is a little bit taller than some of the other enclosed emitter dots out there. And that's probably going to turn some people off. I personally like enclosed emitter dots. And I think this dot would look really good on my Glock 40 because it's such a big handgun already. But I've already got the Gideon Optics Granite on it, and I really like that optic on there, and it's not coming off. So this will eventually end up on a PCC. That's your teaser for what's getting ready to come in to the channel. And my second con with this optic, and it's with any optic this style that has the acro footprint, the optic ends up sitting so high off the slide because you have to put that plate on first and then the optic on top of that plate. And it just makes the optic sit higher than what I like. But that's not just an issue with this Mediator 2. It's an issue with a lot of the other optics out there. So now let's talk about all the pros with this optic. And there's quite a few. First off, you got the top load battery. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why is that a big deal? Well, the reason that's a big deal is because now with the battery on top, you can actually put the lens of the optic down a little bit lower, which means if you have suppressor height sights, you're probably going to be able to co-witness your iron sights if your optic goes down. The other really nice thing about this optic is the fact that it's built like a tank. I racked it pretty good off the tailgate of my truck. I do have some scuffs here on the paint around the front of the glass, but other than that, the glass held up great. There's no scratches on it, and the optic stayed rock solid on the mounting plate all day. My other favorite feature of this are the buttons here on the side. They're nice, tactile, and audible clicks. And even though they're not really recessed in, they're pretty much flush with the side of the optic. So if you decide to use this for a carry option, you should be good to go having your gun in the holster and not having to worry about bumping the brightness level on the optic up or down. And the best part about having an enclosed emitter dot is how easy it is to clean the optic. So being that you have a piece of glass in the front and glass in the back, you can take a microfiber towel or a lens cleaning cloth and just wipe off the back lens, wipe off the front lens, and you're good to go. When you got hands as big as mine, trying to clean the back of the glass on an open emitter dot, it sucks. So my final thoughts on this Mediator 2, I really like this optic. Now, me personally, like I said, I'm not going to leave this on a pistol. I think this optic is going to be a great option for a PCC, or being as rugged as this optic is, it would even make a great backup optic to your LPVO or your rifle scope. And hey, if you like the big mailbox style optics like I do, go ahead and throw it on one of your handguns. Just remember, you will have to order that additional plate from Gideon Optics if you decide to mount this on a handgun. But all in all, I'm super happy with it. I highly recommend it. And I really want to thank Gideon Optics for sending this out to the channel. I've been pretty excited to get my hands on this dot ever since I heard about it at SHOT Show. And if you would like to pick up your own Mediator 2 or any other optics from Gideon, you can head over to my website, scroll down to the weekly deals section. There's always a link to Gideon, and I also have a nice little discount code there to save some of your hard-earned cash. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.